Title: True Reddit Horror Stories from Hospital Workers. What really happens in a hospital after dark? We think of them as places of healing, full of dedicated people we trust with our lives. But when visiting hours end, and the bright lights are replaced by the low hum of the night shift, the whole vibe changes. Those quiet hallways, empty waiting rooms, and sleeping patients, they all hold stories. And some of those stories, which pop up in the dark corners of the internet on forums like Reddit, are genuinely terrifying. These aren't just campfire tales. They're anonymous accounts from people who claim to be on the front lines of life and death, with a barrier between our world and something else feels unnervingly thin. It's important to remember that these are stories from the internet modern folklore, or creepypasta. They aren't verified news reports, but they are shared by people who seem to have been there. Tonight, we're looking at the most chilling and bizarre stories shared by those who walk the hospital halls long after everyone else has gone home. Section 1. The Doctor in the Ward. One of the most popular stories you'll find online takes us to a place that should be all hope and innocence, a pediatric ward. But as any night shift worker will tell you, even cheerful places feel different at 3 a.m. This tale speaks of a nurse who started noticing a weird pattern. The kids, who are often way more perceptive than adults, kept talking about a strange doctor who would visit them at night. The description was always the same: a tall man with gray hair, glasses, and a long white lab coat. At first, the nurse supposedly brushed it off. Maybe a resident was doing late rounds, or the kids were just having comforting dreams. But the stories were too consistent, too detailed. No one on the current staff looked anything like that. Then one night, a little girl who just had her appendix out asked when the nice old doctor was coming back. She said he'd stood by her bed and smiled, which made her feel safe. The detail that was really unsettling was when she described his old-fashioned glasses perfectly, a brand she couldn't possibly know. The story goes that the nurse finally asked some of the veteran staff who'd been at the hospital for decades. When she described the man, one of the older nurses just sort of paused. "Oh, that sounds like Dr. So-and-so," she said, explaining that he had been a beloved pediatrician there for over 30 years. He was known for his gentle personality and for making late-night rounds to check on his sickest patients, even when he was off the clock. The only problem? He had died in that very hospital almost 10 years earlier. This kind of story is a classic urban legend, the idea of a gentle phantom, a ghost of a doctor still making his rounds, refusing to leave his post. Section 2. The elevator with a mind of its own hospitals are often these sprawling, confusing buildings, a mashup of brand new wings and older, sometimes forgotten sections. And it's in these in-between spaces that things get weird. A recurring theme in online hospital horror is the elevator, a simple machine that seems to get a mind of its own in the middle of the night. One story comes from a user who claimed to be a hospital security intern. Their job was to patrol the massive complex at night, a lonely and pretty creepy task. The intern said they always got a bad feeling near the old cancer ward on the 4th floor. The wing had been shut down for years, the equipment gone, the rooms left empty and dark. But the elevator would constantly stop there for no reason at all. They'd be riding alone, say, from the basement to the 1st floor, and the elevator would just shudder to a stop. The 4 would light up, and the doors would slide open to a pitch-black, dead silent hallway. No one was there. No one had pushed the button. After it happened a few times, the intern, smartly, started taking the stairs. But it didn't stop there. When they had to patrol near that ward, they'd hear things: the faint squeak of a gurney wheel, a soft cough, the scuff of a shoe on the floor, and always that overwhelming feeling of being watched. The creepiest moment came one night when they were on the 3rd floor, right below the abandoned ward. They heard the ding of the elevator arriving on the floor above them, followed by the groan of the doors opening. But that was impossible. The elevator to that floor had supposedly been decommissioned years ago. They never went back to that side of the hospital alone, convinced some echo of the past was still riding the elevator, stuck forever, traveling to the floor where so many lives had ended. These tales really make you wonder about the weird energy in a hospital. Is it just a stressful night shift playing tricks on your mind? Or is something else going on? If these stories are giving you the chills, do me a solid and hit that like button and subscribe for more dives into the unexplained. And if you have a story of your own from a hospital or anywhere else, I definitely want to read about it in the comments below. Now, not all hospital horror is supernatural. Sometimes the scariest thing you can run into is very, very human. Section 3. The Trespasser in the Morgue. While ghosts are one thing, the threat of a real physical intruder is something else entirely. This next story, a popular one online, feels less like a ghost story and more like a scene from a horror movie. It's about a security officer at an old hospital with several wings that were shut down and unused. These abandoned areas were a constant headache, attracting everyone from urban explorers to vandals. Around 3 a.m. one night, a silent alarm goes off in the basement, the morgue. That area was supposed to be locked and empty until the morning. The officer and his partner went down, thinking it was just a faulty sensor. But as they got closer, they saw the heavy steel door to the morgue was slightly ajar. Instantly, their training kicked in. They pulled out their flashlights, cutting beams through the heavy darkness. The air was freezing. As they pushed the door open, they found a total mess. Old medical files were thrown everywhere, and a few of the empty body drawers were hanging open. But the thing that made their blood run cold was on the floor. Someone had drawn a bizarre symbol in the center of the room with what looked like salt. In the middle of the circle were several burnt-out black candles. This wasn't just a break-in. It felt like some kind of ritual. They swept the room with their flashlights, shouting, "Security," their voices echoing in the tiled space. Nothing. As they moved to call the police, they heard a sound from a small storage closet. The partner went to check it, and as he opened the door, a figure in dark clothes burst out, knocking him over. The officer chased the intruder as they sprinted down the hall, somehow navigating the basement's maze-like layout perfectly before vanishing through an emergency exit into the night. They never found out who it was or what the hell that ritual in the morgue was for. For the security team, it was a reminder that some of the biggest threats they faced weren't from the dead, but the living. Section 4. The Last Goodbye Sometimes. The hospital stories that stick with you the most aren't about ghosts or intruders, but about these deeply strange and unexplainable moments that happen around death. They're a mix of sad and mysterious, a brush with something just beyond what we can understand. One of the most touching anecdotes you'll see shared by nurses is about an elderly patient, a man fading from a long illness. In his last few days, he started talking non-stop about his dog. He'd tell the nurses he was worried about his dog, that it missed him and that it needed to be walked. The staff knew he lived alone and didn't have any family to look after a pet, so they figured it was just a comforting delusion. One afternoon, the man got very agitated, staring at the door to his room. "He's here," he told his nurse. "My dog is here. He's come to get me." The nurse tried to calm him down, telling him there was no dog in the hospital, but the man just kept smiling faintly, insisting he could hear him barking. A few hours later, he passed away peacefully. The staff felt sad for this lonely man, who died dreaming of a dog he probably never had. Later that evening, 2 nurses were walking past his now empty and sterile room. As they passed the open door, they both froze. From inside the empty room, they heard it, clear as day, the happy, excited bark of a dog. It barked twice, and then there was silence. They looked inside. Nothing. No one. There was no logical explanation. It was as if his loyal friend, whether in spirit or something else, had really come to walk him home. It's a moment that's both chilling and strangely beautiful. A story that nurses say they never forget. Conclusion: from phantom doctors to elevators going nowhere, these online stories paint a pretty wild picture of what a hospital can feel like at night. Most of these tales are set on the night shift, in old buildings and abandoned wards places that feel heavy with the memory of pain and loss. For the people who share these anonymous accounts, maybe it's more than just a spooky story. Maybe it's a way to deal with the incredible stress of their jobs. So, what do you think? Are these just the products of tired minds in a high-pressure environment? Or are places like hospitals really a kind of crossroads between our world and whatever comes next? Thanks for hanging out with me in the unknown. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next trip down the rabbit hole. Stay safe, and whatever you do, try to avoid the night shift. Title: I Should Have Died That Night. Reddit's scariest true crime stories. The last thing I remember is his hand clamping over my mouth. His other hand was twisting the lock on the closet door. And in that instant, I knew with a certainty that just froze my blood. I should have died that night. These aren't your typical ghost stories. They're real-life accounts from people who looked death right in the eye and somehow lived to talk about it. The encounters you're about to hear are a terrifying reminder that the scariest monsters are the ones walking around, looking just like us. Today, we're digging into 3 of the most disturbing near-death experiences from Reddit's Let's Not Meet, where users share true stories about encounters they were incredibly lucky to survive. Our first one starts with a situation that's probably familiar to a lot of us: being home alone, late at night, and hearing a noise you just can't explain. Story number 1. The man in my closet. I was 16, living with my mom, who was a nurse, and my 7-year-old brother, Ryan. Mom worked the night shift, so most evenings I was the adult in the house. The routine was pretty much always the same: get Ryan to bed by 8, and then the house was mine. I'd sprawl out on the couch, watch some TV, and try my best to ignore all the creaks and groans our old house made. It started with small things, the kind of things you can brush off. I'd get home from school, and the back door would be unlocked, even though I could have sworn I locked it. I'd just chalk it up to me being forgetful. Other times, I'd get that prickly feeling on my neck, you know, that deep, unsettling feeling of being watched. I mentioned it to my mom, but she said I just had an overactive imagination from all the scary movies I watched. Then things started to get worse. One night, I was kind of dozing on the couch when this soft scuffing sound from the living room jolted me awake. I sat bolt upright, my heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the room, but everything looked normal. The front door was locked. Windows were secure. But then my eyes stopped on the hall closet. The door was open, just a crack. My blood ran cold. We never left that closet open. It was one of those unspoken house rules, because the heavy door would swing all the way open and block the hall. Every single instinct in my body was screaming at me to run to my room and lock the door. But that stupid curiosity you see in horror movies took over. I crept towards the closet, my feet totally silent on the carpet. I reached out, my hand was trembling, and I yanked the door open. Nothing, just a messy pile of coats and old shoes. I let out this shaky laugh, just hit with a wave of relief. I was just being paranoid. Still, just in case, I locked the closet with the little key we kept on the doorframe. I felt kind of foolish, but I locked it and went to my room. A few nights later, I woke up out of a dead sleep. I wasn't sure what woke me up until I heard it, breathing. It was soft, even rhythmic, and way too close. I just lay there, completely paralyzed, straining to listen in the pitch black. It wasn't my breathing, and it wasn't coming from the hall. It was in my room. Slowly, so carefully, I reached for my phone on the nightstand. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely unlock it. I switched on the flashlight, and the beam just sliced through the dark. I swept the light across my room. Door closed. Windows locked. Nothing. Then I pointed the light at my closet, and that's when I saw him. He was crouched down in the corner, sort of tucked behind my hanging clothes. He was impossibly thin, with greasy, matted hair. His skin looked almost gray in the phone light. But the worst part was his face. He was grinning at me, a wide, hungry smile that didn't reach his eyes at all. His eyes were just dark, empty holes. I don't remember screaming. I don't even remember moving. 1 second I was frozen, staring at the monster in my closet, and the next I was slamming my bedroom door shut, sprinting down the hall to my brother's room. I grabbed a crying Ryan out of his bed and just ran out of the house. I didn't even grab shoes. I was already dialing 911 before my bare feet hit the cold driveway. The police got there so much faster than I thought they would. They found him still in my closet, just sitting there, with that same grin on his face. They told me later he'd been living in our crawl space for weeks, maybe even months. He'd found a loose vent in the basement and had been sneaking into the house at night. He was the one leaving the door unlocked. He was the one I'd felt watching me. The cops said he'd been stealing small bits of food from our kitchen, just enough to get by. But the most terrifying thing they found was in my closet. Tucked away behind my winter coats, they found a kitchen knife. It wasn't from our set. The police think he was just waiting for the right moment. I try not to think about what that moment was, or what he would have done if I hadn't woken up. So to the man who lived in my closet, let's not meet ever again. The next person who shared their story was just trying to do a favor for a friend. A simple act of kindness that almost got them killed, story number 2. The midnight ride. This all went down a few years back when I was living in a pretty remote area of West Texas. My best friend, Sarah, lived about an hour from me in an even smaller town. One night, she calls me, totally panicking. Her car died, and she was stranded at her job, a little diner on the edge of town that closed up at 11 p.m. She'd already tried calling everyone else she knew, but nobody was picking up. I was literally her last hope. Of course, I said yes. That's what friends are for. I told her to hang tight. I'll be there as fast as I can. I grabbed my keys, filled a travel mug with coffee, and hit the road. That drive was lonely. Just a long, dark stretch of highway with nothing but desert and the occasional oil pump nodding in the dark. I got to Sarah just after midnight. She was so relieved. She bought me gas and a ton of greasy food from the diner. We were on our way back, just chatting and laughing, when I glanced in my rearview mirror and saw a pair of headlights. They were way back, but they were there. I didn't think anything of it at first. It's a public road, right? But after 20 minutes or so, I realized they were still there, and they were keeping the exact same distance. A little flicker of unease started in my stomach. I tried to sound casual when I mentioned it to Sarah. She leaned over to look in the side mirror, and her face just tightened. "Speed up a little," she said. Her voice was really quiet. I pushed down on the gas, and my old car kind of groaned. I got it up to 80, then 85. The headlights behind us matched my speed perfectly. Never got closer, never fell back. They just hung there, this constant, menacing presence in the dark. My heart started pounding. This was not a coincidence. "Okay, don't panic," I said, my voice totally betraying how scared I was. "I'm gonna take the next turnoff. It's a county road, but it loops back to the highway. We'll see if he follows us." The turnoff was just a dark, unpaved dirt road. As I swerved onto it, kicking up a huge cloud of dust, I held my breath and watched my mirror. For one amazing second, the highway behind us was empty. And then, the headlights reappeared, turning sharply right after us onto the dirt. The panic I was trying to fight down just exploded into pure terror. Sarah was hyperventilating in the passenger seat. We were on a deserted road in the middle of absolute nowhere. No cell service, being chased. I floored it. The car rattled and shook, bouncing hard over the rough road. The truck behind us, I could see it was a big lifted pickup now, had zero trouble keeping up. Suddenly, his high beams flashed on, flooding my car with this blinding light. I couldn't see a thing in any of my mirrors. It felt like the light was just swallowing us whole. Then he started gaining on us, fast. I knew, with this sick feeling in my gut, what he was going to do. He was going to ram us, run us right off the road, where no one would find us until morning. I was screaming. Sarah was sobbing. I was yanking the steering wheel back and forth, just trying to be a hard target. The truck was right on my bumper now, its massive grille filling up my entire rearview mirror. I braced for the hit, and then I saw a light, up ahead, a single flickering porch light. It was a house, a small ranch house sitting all by itself in the middle of the desert. I didn't even think. I just aimed my car for it, like it was a lighthouse in a hurricane. I slammed on my brakes, skidding to a stop in the driveway, and just laid on the horn, not letting up for a second. Lights flicked on in the house. A dog started barking like crazy. I risked a look in the mirror. The truck had stopped at the edge of the property. For a long, terrifying moment, it just sat there, its high beams still pinning us down. Then, slowly, it backed up onto the dirt road and just vanished into the night. An old man in a bathrobe came out onto his porch holding a shotgun. We basically fell out of the car, babbling our story. He called the sheriff, who came and took our report, but told us there wasn't much they could do. They never found the truck. We stayed with that kind man until the sun was up, way too scared to get back on the road in the dark. What would you have done if you were in their shoes? Let me know down in the comments. Our final story is a terrifying lesson in why you should always trust your gut. Story number 3. The roommate audition. After I finished college, I decided to move to a new city. I didn't know a soul there, so I turned to the internet to find a place to live. I found an ad for a room for rent in this big, beautiful house in a really nice neighborhood. The rent was like surprisingly cheap. The ad was posted by a guy named David, who said he was looking for a roommate to share the home with. I set up a time to see the place. When I got there, David greeted me at the door. He was probably in his late 30s, super charismatic, almost overly friendly. He gave me the grand tour of the house, and it was even more impressive in person. He talked a lot, telling me all about his job, his hobbies, and how he just loved having roommates because it felt like one big, happy family. There was something a little too intense about his smile, but I just blew it off as him being an eager, friendly person. The room for rent was on the second floor, and it was perfect. Big, private bathroom, huge window overlooking a garden. As I was taking it all in, David said something kind of strange. "The most important thing for me is trust," he said, and his eyes were just locked on me. "I need to know I can trust the person living in my home." He told me his last roommate had left suddenly and that he was really hurt by it. He made me promise that if I took the room, I wouldn't do the same thing. It felt a little weird, kind of like a first date getting way too serious, way too fast. But the house was amazing, and the rent was a steal. So I agreed. I moved in that next weekend. The first couple of days were fine. David was a little overbearing, always asking my plans and what time I'd be home, but I just chalked it up to him trying to be nice. Then the weird rules started. He insisted that I was not allowed to lock my bedroom door. He called it a trust exercise and said that locks create barriers in a home that should be open. I argued with him, telling him I needed privacy. He got agitated, and that friendly vibe just vanished. He said my wanting a lock proved I didn't trust him, and he looked so genuinely hurt that I actually felt guilty. I reluctantly agreed, just telling myself I could shove a chair under the doorknob at night. A few nights later, I'm dead asleep, and my bedroom door creaks open. I woke up instantly. My heart just leaped into my throat. David was standing in the doorway, a silhouette against the hall light. "What are you doing?" I whispered, pulling the covers up to my chin. "I just wanted to make sure you were okay," he said, his voice all soft. "I had a bad dream that you had left, like the others." He stood there for what felt like forever, just watching me, before he quietly closed the door. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I pretended like nothing happened, but I immediately started looking for a new place. The next night, I was determined not to be caught by surprise. I stayed up late, reading in bed with my lamp on. Around 2 a.m., the door creaked open again. This time, I was ready. I sat right up and stared at him. "David, this is not okay. You cannot keep coming into my room." He didn't answer. He just walked into the room and sat on the edge of my bed. My whole body went completely stiff. "I know you're planning on leaving," he said. His voice was chillingly calm. "I can't let that happen. The last girl tried to leave too. I had to persuade her to stay." He reached out and touched my arm. His hand was like ice. "I don't want to have to persuade you too. We're a family now." The way he said it, the dead look in his eyes, I knew he wasn't just talking. This persuasion was not going to be a conversation. This man wasn't just creepy. He was dangerous. One had to get out of there. So I did something I'm not proud of, but I knew my life was on the line. I forced a smile, and I lied. I told him he was right, that I was just being silly and hormonal. I told him how happy I was to be living there, to be part of his family. I sold it as hard as I could, even suggesting we watch a movie together the next day. It was like a switch flipped. The warm, charismatic David was back. He smiled, squeezed my arm, and said he knew I'd come around. Then he left, closing the door behind him. The second I heard his bedroom door click shut down the hall, I was out of that bed. I didn't pack a single thing. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and my phone. I slipped out of my room, tiptoed down the stairs, and ran out the front door. I didn't stop running for several blocks until I felt safe enough to call a taxi to take me to a 24-hour motel. The next day, I had a friend go with me to get my stuff while I knew David was at work. I never saw him again, but I did report him to the police, and I found out I wasn't the first person to do so. The roommate before me had also filed a report after she fled in the middle of the night. Turns out, he was auditioning for a victim, not a roommate. 3 people, 3 terrifying encounters with real-life monsters. A huge thank you to the original posters on Reddit for being brave enough to share these stories. They're a stark reminder to always be aware of your surroundings, to listen to that gut feeling when it tells you something is off, and to remember that sometimes the most dangerous situations start in the most ordinary ways. If you want more true stories of survival, make sure to like this video and subscribe. We've got plenty more stories that prove the truth is almost always scarier than fiction. Stay safe out there.